My name is William Wainwright. I serve as Interim Chancellor of Delgado Community College, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all here this morning for our most important symposium. I will tell you what I'm most proud of is we're certainly making history. It's not common that you can have every higher education institution in the greater New Orleans region represented in the room, and we do have all of our public and private 2-year and 4-year institutions represented. So it says a lot about the importance of our programming while we're here. We're here today for our inaugural Food Insecurity Symposium. And let me be very clear about the goal of this effort. Our goal is to ensure that we establish a robust consortium where we gather each semester as higher education institutions addressing a common issue, and that we keep this issue on the forefront, that we bring in esteemed panelists to continue to guide us on the research that guides informed decision making. And so what we know about food insecurity is we know that in the United States today we have 50 million individuals who are food insecure, 17 million of them children. That's why I'm most proud of our campus care corner here at Delgado Community College, because since its inception just a few short years ago, we've served close to 1,500 students and their families. And that is most important to us. And so what's most alarming too is when you look at food insecurity and food deserts within rural and urban areas, we know that there's an alignment that exacerbates the crisis. So today we bring food insecurity and education to the forefront, and we envision a future where students and families do not go without, and that they're food secure and education rich. And so learning feeds the mind and the intellect, but as we know, without food for the body, learning cannot nourish a healthy and happy quality of life. I want to thank all of our higher education institutions, all of our leaders, Dr. Kimbrough, who's with us, our president of Dillard. I have heard from each president of each institution about their enthusiasm and support of this initiative and their teams who will be with us today. I want to thank Dr. Corey Hebert and our esteemed panelists. Dr. Hebert and I, we have coffee every weekend. He doesn't know it. I'm in my recliner listening to his house call. He did inform me that he can see through the television to make sure that I have my pajamas on. But thank you, certainly, Dr. Hebert, and to our panelists for what you bring to today's discussion. As educators, we want to be fully informed. We want to ensure that we're providing proper information. Very proud of the Delgado family and our student affairs team, who Dr. Posey will recognize for the incredible work they've done for food insecurity. And certainly, we look forward to the establishment of this consortium here today. Thank everybody for being with us. And at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Posey to introduce our panelists.
I was going to say, y'all need to give me some life and give me It's Friday, it's the end of the week, it's Jazz Fest. I have some notes so I can stay on track and make sure that we stay on time if you guys don't mind. I want to echo Dr. Wainwright's sentiments and welcome you all to Delgado Community College. I do have the honor of introducing our panelists this morning and will also serve as the moderator for the discussion. So without any further ado, Ms. Ahofi Agbabli is originally from Togo, West Africa, but has lived 13 years in Germany, where she earned a degree as a geriatric nurse assistant. After completing her courses in our ESL program, she was able to take her prerequisites, which had been her dream. Ahofi began the nursing program when her daughter was 6 months old, and it says in her first semester, she failed and cried a lot. And she didn't understand at the time why, but now today she does. She is extremely grateful and has expressed that gratitude to the single stop department, but especially to Gilda Ebanks, who I'll introduce to you shortly, for her consistent encouragement and assistance with social services applications. She's also says that her family has experienced hardship while in school, but Delgado's food pantry, as well as the toiletries, has helped her a lot. She's a current member of Phi Theta Kappa and a nursing student, may I have everyone's attention, who will graduate on May 23rd. One more round of applause because she has also accepted employment as a registered nurse at Two-Row Hospital. That's what I'm talking about. Dr. Hebert is a practicing physician whose travels across the country and around the globe have connected him to thousands of people as both a leader and a motivator while practicing both pediatrics and emergency medicine. He is an assistant professor at both LSU Health Sciences Center and Tulane University Medical Center. He's also the host of a weekly radio show that Dr. Wainwright thinks he's the only person who's available who participates, called Doctor for the People, in which he answers health questions live on the air from people throughout New Orleans. He's also the Chief Executive Officer of Community Health TV, which is the parent company of College Health TV, the largest provider of health videos for college students in the country. College TV has clients such as the University of Southern California, Louisiana State University, Duke University, and hundreds of others. Dr. Hebert, thank you. Dr. Dennis Kellogg is I love when he told me this, an economic justice specialist at Loyola University. He graduated from there and eventually went on to earn a doctorate in sociology from the Union Institute. He currently serves in his position in the Jesuit Social Research Institute located at Loyola University. Thank you, Dr. Kellogg. Corey Patty is Feeding Louisiana Executive Director. He joined the State Association of Food Banks in 2017 with years of experience in business and economic development, as well as public policy and advocacy. Previously at Louisiana Economic Development, Mr. Patty represented the state of Louisiana in targeting business development opportunities to diversify Louisiana's economic portfolio. Prior to his employment there, he worked on behalf of clients across a variety of industries, managing advocacy efforts and policy proposals for Southern Strategy Group. During this time, he was appointed by Governor Bobby Jindal to serve on the Louisiana Healthcare Commission. Thank you, Corey Patty. And last but certainly not least, Carrie Welton is a policy analyst on the Income and Work Supports team for the Center for Law and Social Policy, also known as CLASP, from Washington, D.C. Her work focuses on advocating for policy reforms that improve the lives of people with low incomes and communities of color through a racial equity lens. This includes improving access to public benefit programs for post-secondary students and student parents with low incomes to advance their academic success. She advocates for policy reforms that strengthen the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. Previously, Ms. Welton spent 3 years at W.K. Kellogg Foundation on the National Education and Learning Team, focused on early childhood systems alignment. In addition, she spent 4 years at the Kellogg Company conducting research and providing strategic direction to inform the organization's government relations and lobbying efforts. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you.
And since she's here from DC, I had a special welcome to thank her for making the correct turn on City Park Avenue and coming to Delgado and not going to Jazz Fest round. I know it could have easily sort of happened that way.
It was a tough call.
Yeah. So as you all can see, we are very, very fortunate to have this distinguished group of panelists with us this morning. And I know that we're in for a very rich and informative conversation. Dr. Hebert and Carrie Welton will set the tone for that conversation in just a few minutes before we begin our discussion. Dr. Hebert has agreed to discuss the relationship between healthy eating or healthy living and a quality lifestyle as it relates to academic success, or the challenge of food insecurity on our community, and why, as educators, we should be concerned. Ms. Welton is going to provide remarks from a policy standpoint. She will also share the work that CLASP is involved with at this time in our great state with both Governor John Bell Edwards and Commissioner Kim Hunter Reed's offices. So as we say in the church on Sunday morning, please come in that order.
I like that. Well, I'm Dr. Corey Bear, and I am not wearing a bow tie today. And there's a real reason, a very strategic reason. You'll notice that when you're at home, you don't really wear a tie, right? And so today, I wanted to make sure that I was amongst family, because we have to talk about something that is not very easy to talk about sometimes. We have to talk about something like you handle it in the family. Because what's happening in this city and around the country is something that is very, very serious. So I'm okay, right? I'm good. I don't need the time, right? I'm good. All right. This morning, I have to say, things have a way of working themselves out. I was driving in and had a real first world problem. My car started running hot, right? On a hot morning, after dropping my daughter off at school on the way to a lecture in a place that is a place where I come all the time. And I would have yesterday been like very upset. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. But then I had to think about, where am I going? I'm going to discuss food insecurity. Meaning I'm going to where to discuss people not being able to eat. And I have a car. So I need to get my mind right. I need to realize and put some priorities in and say, what's the big deal? I get the car fixed, it's not a big deal. Right? So I think it's important that we frame this in that way, because we have a hierarchy of needs that we are very, very clear about, as we have used research over the last 100 years to show what's very important. Food is real hot, all right? And if you don't have it, certain things cannot happen, meaning you cannot live. And I say that in a way that we know, euphemistically that you can't live, but you also can't thrive, all right? Now, I've done studies and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories about everything you can name. Like the last couple of stories I did on the news have been got the most feedback ever. One of them was, if you don't eat breakfast, the study was just came out in the American Journal of Cardiology, then you have an 89% chance of dying from a cardiovascular disease, and a higher 89% risk than a person that does eat breakfast. All right? Now, the only problem is that that's not the kind of breakfast. That's on special occasions, okay? And today's special occasion, so have fun, eat up. Don't get nervous because I understand that, right? But it means low-fat yogurt, granola, whatever. But that's important. The other story was about something called allulose. I don't know if you guys have heard of allulose, but it is a new sugar that's called a rare sugar from dates, raisins, and pecans, and a couple of other monk fruits. But the point is, it has 1/10 the calories of sugar, 70% of the taste, and has no aftertaste and doesn't cause tooth decay. You can write that down. Allulose, okay? It's commercially available, and I'm sure it's very, very, very expensive. I have tasted it. And also, the one that a lot of people are talking about was the one that, and this is called outdoor my house. It's all this about food. Every store I tell you, it's all about food. The CDC just came out and said you don't have to wash your chicken before you actually cook it. You actually should not wash your chicken before you cook it. Now, I'm from a black household. My mama called me real quick. Oh, you need to stop talking about that on the news, because your grandma used to put chicken in the dishwasher. So we have all these stories, and by the way, that is true. The CDC did say that, and they said because by the time you cross-contaminate everything else, you get sicker from everything else than the actual chicken that you didn't wash. Because if you cook the chicken enough, you'll kill all bacteria. So that's actually true. Okay. I don't know how much I would do that in my house, but I'm just saying that's what's good to know. So with all these stories about food, I'm going to take one story in 15 years about people not happy. I feel bad about that. And I started going back and said, we need to get this together. We need to get our minds right. And so now, when she asked me to do this, I said, we need to really frame this. People need to understand what's going on. Once we start putting this in some perspective, we have to start thinking about our children, college students, elderly. But what we also have to remember is that it's not just people that are quote unquote what you would think of as poor. Okay? We know the homeless person. Okay? We know that that person probably doesn't have food in his bag. But what about the student? What about a working family? All right? And that's what I deal with a lot, because we have a real problem with automation in this country. We know in the year 2030, 22% of jobs that we have in the United States right now will not be here. 22% of jobs. Now, in 1929, the Depression was when we lost 25% of jobs. So when you start talking about this, you don't think, oh, I can't really see that happening. Oh, you can't? Okay, go to Walmart. Go to Target. Remember they used to have all those cashiers sitting there. Now you go and they got 2 cashiers and 15 self-checkout lines. What happened to those jobs? Which means that the food insecurity that we're dealing with is going to get a lot worse, because we don't have the training, quote unquote, to get the jobs that we need, and we actually do have it, but it's hard to access, especially when you don't have the support that you need. We applaud our universities here, Delgado for training folks, but some people just don't even think that they're worthy enough to have that, especially if you come from a food insecure background. So I need you to know that we're going to talk today a lot about demographics. We're going to talk a lot about a lot of statistics, and I think that's important. But I wanted to come at a little bit of a different angle, because we know that a child that doesn't have formula is not going to thrive. We know that an elderly person that doesn't have food is going to break their hip because they don't have enough calcium, and then they're going to lead their demise. But the biggest group that we don't talk about is, I think, the college student. I think that's a really important one. Before we get there, though, I just want you to just kind of wrap your mind around this. I was the chief medical officer of the Recovery School District for the state of Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina, okay? And also chief medical officer of OPS. And so we noticed after Hurricane Katrina, obviously they had a lot of people did that too. But we were 7 years out, and we noticed that a lot of kids were losing weight. Now, when you think a kid losing weight, it's like, oh, he's running around all the time, or he just wants to eat candy or whatever. But I started getting the data from the nursing, school nurses throughout the district, and we saw a gradual decline of the patient's weight when we related it to the patient's income. All right? Now, when you think about that, you're like, well, if a person has very low income, then they should probably even get weight. They should probably have some type of subsidy. But what about the people that fall through those cracks? And this was not a small amount. This was a substantial amount of students. So I spoke to Aramark and Sodexo and all these places that provide that we have these giant contracts with to provide the cafeteria food that sometimes is good and sometimes is crappy, to be honest with you. And we said, I'm sorry, sometimes. Most of the time it's good. Yeah, most times it's good. So we looked to them to say, we give you this contract. We have children, I think, that are not actually getting food. So we need to come up with a program, and we don't want to embarrass the kids. And with a program that gave children a full backpack of food to go home with on the weekend. Full backpack. And then they would bring the backpack home, and then they would bring the backpack back to us on Monday. And everyone said, well, they're going to lose the backpacks. They're not going to do this, they're not going to do this. Once we started doing that, we didn't actually document and we let the people know that we were keeping this type of data, all right? But all those kids, and it was over the cohort of 200 kids, their weight started to rebound. Okay? What did that mean? That meant that these children were not eating at home on the weekend. Then we correlated that with their ability to pass the NEET test, and then their ability to have over a 3.0 grade point average. As soon as it started going down, grade point average went up. As soon as we started seeing it going up, grade point average went up. That's real. That's real. So as you hear these statistics, as you hear all this stuff, you have to really think that this is going on in our community, and there's something we got to do about it. So presently, I'm also Chief Medical Officer at Dillon University, and I see our esteemed colleagues here, and you guys are coming. I've been at Dillon for a while, and I'm leaving you with this anecdote. I was at Dillon probably for about 6 weeks, and I had a student come to the Student Health Center. Student dressed to kill. When I say dressed to kill, had, I mean, everything you could possibly name brand this, name brand. And she was dating a guy who was, I thought, of moderate means, quote unquote, but he didn't have all this stuff, right? And he came to me after about 6 or 7 months of them dating, and he kept coming in with these blisters and coming in losing hair and all this stuff. So I, you know, heart rate meetings, I'm thinking that he's probably got hyperthyroidism or something like that. But doing all these tests. I mean, I'm running tests, all kind of tests. And what I didn't do though is assess his nutrition. Okay, there are certain tests you can do to assess nutrition. It's not just regular blood tests. So I'm doing everything I need to do to make sure that he's not getting better. He's just not getting better. And then, after about a month, he comes to me and says, Dr. Ray, I can tell you something. What? He's like, I don't have any food. And I was like, what are you talking about? He says, I'm spending the money that I have trying to just keep up with my girl. All I'm trying to do is to make sure that I look nice, that I'm clean. And when I do all that, I don't have any money for food. He didn't live on campus. He basically lived in a hospital. He didn't have anything, but he was a student, and nobody knew because he didn't look the part, because he was keeping up. And what I want you to realize is that as clinicians, as academicians, whatever we are in this room, we have to ask the question. You can't just think that just because a person looks a certain way that they didn't have any food. And also you got to remember that some people have food insecurity, not just because they don't have the money, but some people have mental health problems. Okay? So they put things out of order, and you still don't know because they look the part. So, with that being said, you're going to have a lot of great information. When we leave here, this is not about what we are doing here today. This is about what we're going to be doing as a group tomorrow and beyond to eliminate the disparity of health, welfare, and nutrition, and economic development, and everything that we can name when it comes to disparities in this country. We have to come together as a consortium to eliminate those by any means necessary. So thank you very much, and I'm going to pass it over to President.
Hey everyone, I'm Carrie Welton. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. It really is a true honor, and I appreciate Dr. Cozy's amazing introduction of me. I sound really boring though, so I also want to say from a personal standpoint, I am a proud former community college student, single teen parent. Took me 11 years to get my bachelor's degree, and I really come to this from a place where it's really my heart also. So thank you for allowing me to be here and to share my information. It occurred to me that I'm a statistics and demographics person. So I'm not sure how to advance the slides. So this is the title of my presentation, but I do just want to say that food banks are critically important. You should have a food bank, and access to food banks is very important, but class comes at things from a place of systems change. You know, we know that a lot of the policies and systems in our country have been created through a white dominant middle class narrative that have left out people with low incomes, people who have had non-traditional paths to childbearing. I'm just going to do this and keep it real. Thank you. Non-traditional paths to childbearing, and so when class approaches how to help people, we really think about how are we changing the systems of oppression and the barriers that are in place for people with low incomes and people from communities of color. So, as promised, statistics and demographics. As you all know, low-income students are enrolling in college at rates unprecedented. Since 1975, when statistics have been collected on student enrollment, it's always been upper-income and middle-income students enrolling in college after high school. For the first time ever, low-income students are now enrolling at rates higher than their middle-income peers. The Hope Center for Community College put out a report recently, like 5 days ago, that talked about food insecurity, housing insecurity, and homelessness among 2- and 4-year institutions. And you can see some of the rates here. Across both of those, the average was about 45% experiencing food insecurity. And as previously stated, we know that food insecurity, it impacts your ability to sleep, it impacts your ability to function, it impacts your emotional well-being, it impacts your mental health well-being. So really, class thinks about addressing food insecurity as a completion strategy, which I know that's why you all are here, as you agree with that. Many of you also know the demographics on Louisiana students. So 44% have incomes at $30,000 or below. 69% are working while they're in school. 70% of students are color. And Louisiana students' Pell Rate is also higher than the national average. So higher average Pell Rate indicates, higher need, and higher levels of unmet financial need. And then higher rates of students of color mean any efforts to address food insecurity have to be done through an explicit racial equity lens to ensure we're achieving equitable outcomes. So when class thinks about public benefits and we think about financial aid, this is how we think about comprehensive financial aid. In all of the columns, the 4 columns on the left are all of the ones you traditionally know about. It's federal aid, it's state aid, it's private financing, it's institutional aid, and we include this 5th pillar on the far right that really looks at how can public benefits like SNAP, formerly food stamps, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and access to child care. Access to child care is a completion strategy. How can these programs that already exist better support student completion? And how can both institutions and states, in the context of this federal environment, make changes that are going to help students do that? There are a whole host of rules that restrict students' access to public benefits. And since welfare reform in the early 90s, we really know that it's all about work first. That's not the reality anymore. As previously stated, the majority of jobs these days, quality jobs with livable wages, with employer-paid benefits and retirement, require a college degree. It really is the new sort of baseline for being able to achieve economic security. It's not to say that college is not for everybody. My 23-year-old is not in college, and I fully support his decision to support himself at whatever level of financial security that he would like to pursue, as long as he's not asking me for help. So these are just sort of a highlight of, in the federal rules for public assistance, where the restrictions are for students. For the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, a student is only considered a student for SNAP's purposes if they're enrolled at least half-time, as defined by the institution. In addition to being income eligible and household eligible, they also have to meet at least one of several exemptions, which include working 20 hours a week, participating in work study, and a whole host of other exemptions. And I'm happy to share a fact sheet with you if you'd like to share it with your students on campus about how they can become eligible for SNAP. TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Program, formerly Aid to Families with Dependent Children, provides basic cash assistance. It's virtually non-existent in Louisiana. I think the rate of for every 100 families in poverty in Louisiana, I think 3 are receiving cash assistance. And child care subsidies also have similar restrictions. The important thing to know about these is that in many of these instances, states have a lot of flexibility around how they design their public benefit programs to support or not to support students. So we know that to address food insecurity, SNAP is an important component. A recent GAO study looked at food insecurity among college students and identified that among all low-income undergraduate students that were potentially eligible for SNAP, 57% did not participate in the program. The SNAP Employment and Training Program, I love when people say SNAP needs work requirements. SNAP has work requirements. SNAP has had work requirements for at least 3 decades that I can recall. If you are a person who meets certain qualifications, you're required to register for work, you have to meet certain other requirements, and you can receive supportive services through the SNAP Employment and Training Program. Like the other federal programs, the SNAP Employment and Training Program has a lot of flexibility that states can use to support students. The state is actually currently engaging with LCTCS and some community-based institutions to look at how to foster those connections and better support students. It can include tuition assistance, it can include childcare assistance, it can include a whole range of supportive services that are far beyond just food assistance. So, as I mentioned before, many Louisiana community college students are receiving a Pell Grant. Unmet need at Louisiana institutions is still incredibly high. So the financial need that students are not able to address through their own resources. So around $7,000 a year for 4-year public students and around $5,500 a year for 2-year public students. So we know there's still a lot of need out there. CLASP has been doing this work for a while, I would say probably 4 or 5 years in different ways. We've been working with states, and there was a pilot program called Benefits Access for College Completion. If anybody's interested in that, I can send you a link to that final report after today. But it really showed that additional supportive services help students persist and complete. I know, shocking, right? So it was really a combination of institutional supportive services, connecting students to benefits, providing academic counseling, using early alert systems. You know, if someone was experiencing academic challenges, using that as an opportunity to talk about what other challenges they might be facing beyond, you know, just sort of flagging them for, you know, restricted financial aid or other more punitive measures. We talk about what institutions can do on sort of like a continuum of both, you know, intensity of resources and intensity of activity. So, you know, obviously food banks are critically important. Institutions can also be using any opportunity they have when they connect with students to talk about public benefits, using their social media platforms to talk about access to public benefits, ensuring that students who come in for supportive services, whether that's academic counseling or, you know, coming into the food bank or any other place that you can touch students to try to embed access to public benefits. And this is really about ensuring that students know that everybody struggles, everybody needs help sometimes. We know one of the huge barriers for students in accessing public benefits is stigma. This country has done a very good job of shaming people for being poor. And that is very true for community college students, for 4-year college students. And we talk to institutions about how are you embedding access to supportive services in every possible place to make that the cultural norm, to make sure that people know that these are our values, we're here to help, we're here to support you, persist and complete. That can include examples like a note at the bottom of, you know, syllabi explaining where supportive services are, or embedding it in new student orientation, or, you know, including in your financial aid award letter that if you receive a Pell Grant, you could potentially be eligible for SNAP. So there's also more intensive opportunities, you know, Single Stop is a phenomenal program helping students, and then, you know, some institutions have even taken on embedding benefits, access, and sort of navigators that help with a range of things, connections to childcare, connection to public benefits, and really sort of taking like a whole student approach beyond academics. Those are some more resource-intensive activities, so that's going to require some funding and some additional support from institutions. So Dr. Cozy mentioned that we're currently working with the governor and his education and workforce subcabinet. We're working with them on a project where we have done an intensive policy scan of all the public benefit programs that you've looked at in Louisiana and made recommendations where the state can make improvements to help students with low income access these public benefit programs. And I just have to say, like on a personal note, this project includes 2 other states. So we're working with 3 states, including Louisiana, and I have been so impressed by the agency leadership, by the collaboration, by the willingness of people to really take on this issue. And I have to say that of the 3 states, Louisiana is definitely out front setting the model for what these types of partnerships look like. So I think that the work that you're doing here and that you're going to continue to do is really supported from your state leadership side and in a policy standpoint. And we're happy to continue to think about how are we bookending these efforts to try to get to both the policy and the practice standpoint. Obviously, we think this will improve post-secondary success of Louisiana students. More efficient use of limited resources. For example, the SNAP Employment and Training Program. In Washington State, they have community colleges registered as third-party administrators for SNAP. So those community colleges are using non-federal funding streams and getting a 50% reimbursement for those directly back to their institutions for the supportive services they're providing for SNAP-eligible students. And that is capturing federal money left on the table. And when we think about these resources that are available, state and federal resources beyond traditional academic resources, you're really bolstering your educational investments. We're really tapping into state and federal dollars to really be able to support students with a range of resources beyond what we've traditionally thought about. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie and Dr. Hebert. I'm very happy Dr. Wainwright and I making contact because we actually have a meeting this Monday with a consulting group, Benton and Associates, that's coming in, meeting with some folks from the state level and talking with us because we're implementing the very plan that Carrie just mentioned to you about accessing the 50% return. So we're excited about that. Thank you, Dr. Hebert and Carrie, for setting the tone for us. Now I would like to invite the remaining panelists to give their opening statements before we get to questions. I'll start with Dr. Caleb and then turn to Mr. Patty and then Ms. Ekbobli.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. This problem has disturbed me for a long time. This problem of hunger, homeless, and other related problems, homelessness, economic insecurity broadly, which affects the majority of people in this country. In fact, many families have no collective financial assets, and many of those who do have very limited assets. They're one paycheck away from panic. This in a country that has been called the wealthiest country the world has ever seen, right? A $20 trillion economy where there is a lot of wealth, there's a lot of money. We have enough resources in this country to solve any of these problems we're talking about. And so that makes it particularly galling that we have to keep talking about these things and share stories of real human pain amidst such great wealth. So we always have to remember the context for this. These are solvable problems. It will require, though, some significant work to reduce them, but it will take great commitment and energy to eliminate these problems because, a lot of people benefit from the existence of poor people, right? That's how folks make money, off of paying other folks very little money. This is a system, how it's built. Anyway, a few things I wanted to share. Some of the things I had here in my notes were already talked about, so I don't want to go through that again. Certainly, it was mentioned that hunger impacts the ability to learn, right, and to succeed. We do know from research that it does, in fact, impact retention and graduation rates. It's such an extreme problem for so long that now it's been reported that students are selecting colleges based on their sensitivity to this issue, right? They are coming to college from some place, maybe another college or a high school or some experiences in their youth where they have been food insecure. And so when they look to try to continue their education and they see a college or university that is caring about these problems and has set up an infrastructure to deal with it, when the institution shows it cares and is trying to help, a student will be drawn to that place, right? So it's amazing that, you know, it's something I hadn't thought about very much until very recently, that, you know, of all the things that students consider when they apply for college, it's, do they have a food bank? Are they sensitive to the needs of low-income students and struggling students and food insecure students such as myself? I hadn't really thought that much about it, right? And I'm a sociologist who's talking about inequality my whole life, so that issue really struck me. We know the problem is particularly acute during, for college students, during breaks. Holidays, right? There's a lot of students who can't go home, like on residential campuses. They can't go home during holidays like other students because they can't afford it. Well, if they can't afford to go home, they probably can't afford to eat out during the break when the dining halls are closed. So colleges and universities are beginning to recognize this gap and are addressing it, but many are not. So that's certainly something that has to be addressed. There are now hundreds of college food banks that exist, but we know, as has been said, that's just one thing that we can do. It's one Band-Aid, a very important thing, but there's a lot of other things that we need to do. And for one thing, a lot of students will not take advantage of the food banks that do exist on campuses. Because one, they may not really know where they are, may not understand the hours, may not understand how they might be treated. Those facilities might not have, you know, their particular needs, you know, if you're allergic to peanuts, you can't eat the peanut butter. If you don't like tuna, and a lot of people don't, you know, they may have cereal, but if you can't get milk, right? So there's a few things that, you know, some pantries are kind of sparse. And so they don't have what the students need. So for a variety of reasons, students will not take advantage of not just not applying for SNAP benefits, but just not going to food banks. At Loyola, I wasn't involved in the study, so I don't want to take credit for a fine study that was done at Loyola last year, about a year ago. A food insecurity survey was conducted from a previous survey. It was recognized that there might be a problem, so they decided, let's do a food insecurity survey. 593 respondents on campus. It was a convenient sample, so you know, not a scientific random sample, so we'd be cautious about these numbers. That doesn't really matter because the numbers are so significant. We have to wake up. 593 respondents. Of the undergrad respondents, which were a rather large group, 70% expressed some food insecurity issues in that year. 38% of grad students, 29% of staff, and 14% of faculty. As I said, don't get bogged down in the numbers. It's just a lot, and that's what we have to be concerned about at Loyola, and I'm sure similar numbers, a little bit better, a little bit worse across this city. Some of the complaints were expressed, concerns that were expressed in that survey. There was lack of available affordable grocery options nearby, food deserts around college campuses, limited dining hall hours and closures during breaks, end of the semester crunch when the money is running out, plus you can't work as many hours because you're trying to study and get those final papers in, right? Those are the things that were really affecting students. There were a number of suggestions in that report, and I'm very pleased to say, is Nadia here from Loyola? Hi. Yes, right. I think we'll have some time a little bit later. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about the situation at Loyola and the food bank and stuff. Yeah. I just have a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to finish up here. But we do want to hear more about that. I'm very proud to say that Loyola did take to heart virtually all of the recommendations from a year ago. Most of them have been implemented. Creating a food bank, Iggy's Cupboard, which we'll be talking about, right after St. Ignatius Loyola, Iggy's Cupboard. Great hours are open, I think, every day into the evening. That's really good. There was a suggestion that the food service implement a food swipe sharing donation a possibility, and I understand that they have done so. Expanding dining hours, that's an important, and some other things. So I think, how much time do I have? I don't want to get into somebody else.
Can you say that for the comments, so we can move on?
Okay, good. Yeah, I thought I might be running out of time. I have a few other things besides what we've already talked about and what Loyola has been implementing. There's a few other suggestions I will have about what colleges and universities can do moving forward. So, thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
My name is Corey Patty. I'm the Executive Director of Feeding Louisiana, the State Association of Food Banks. We have 5 regional food banks located across the state, Shreveport, Monroe, Alexandria, Baton Rouge, and then here in New Orleans, and also covering the southwestern portion of the state is Second Harvest. I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with Second Harvest and their great work in this area. The network that Feeding Louisiana kind of sits at the top of contains those 5 food banks and then all of their partner organizations. So if that's churches, if that's community centers, senior community homes, senior apartments, things like that, the food pantries that are located at these universities across the state that we see popping up more and more. And we know that food insecurity and hunger is a significant issue. It's truly an honor to be up here with this panel that knows so much about the history, the causes, the root issues. And I'm kind of new to the game. I've been with the association for 2 years now, but my role is essentially advocacy and policy. We do some fundraising and food raising on behalf of the food banks as well. But I really appreciated hearing earlier that this work goes beyond food banks, right? So we've got in each food bank targeted programs for children. And, again, we know that this issue is so entrenched in Louisiana. We find ourselves at the top or the bottom, depending on the way you're looking at it, of just about every list related to food insecurity. So if that's children, if that's seniors, if that's kind of the picture across the board, we're one of the highest states of food insecurity in the country. And this is kind of an emerging issue. One of the things that we talk about is the role of food insecurity in kind of everything, right? I mean, we've heard today about its impact in health outcomes. We've heard today about its impact in educational outcomes, in economic outcomes. So these are really the messages that our association tries to carry forward in working with policymakers in the legislature, in state government, kind of universities and other partners across the state, and utilizing a lot of the great information that folks up here and members of the audience can pull together. So I'm looking forward to the question and answer period. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ahwefa, and as And as Dr. Cozy said, I'm from West Africa. English is my 4th language. And since I have been here in New Orleans for about 4 years now, I can say that Delgado, I love Delgado. So I began my studies here with ESL, and I met Miss Gilda Ebanks from Single Stops, and she has been there for me. I can tell you, whenever I went to Single Stop office, she hugged me every time I was crying because I had difficulty. She had been there for me. She had always said it will pay off. She had encouraged me to go ahead, finish my studies, and here I am now today. I will be graduating next month, and I have a job. I know I will be the one who will tell a lot about Single Stop. As Dr. Eber said, if you see someone, you won't know that they are suffering from hunger, and it's true. If you see me, you won't believe that I have been through hardship with my family. So, but my smile, and I have been fortunate to meet Miss Gilda Ebanks from Single Stop because she allowed me to come and choose the food I wanted for me, for my family, and I had a 3.5-year-old girl and a son. And I chose my diapers at Single Stop, food pantry, the toothbrushes, everything I needed for my family. So I can say Single Stop helped me a lot. And what else? With the studies at Charities graduate, we have a lot of assignment to do. And with small little kids, it wasn't easy for me to go home and study. And Miss Miller is here today. She is the one who you can go to at Charity School of Nursing and reserve a room. So after every classes, I stayed at the school and I studied before going pick up my kids from the daycare or from the school so that we can go home. So at Charity School, we have rooms with computers and every student can go there and study. And it has helped me a lot. I can say that. I don't know what to say.
So now we're going to begin and just take just a few questions, or present a few questions to the panelists before we open it up to the audience. So I want to start by asking Mr. Patty and Dr. Caleb, can you define for the audience, just to ground us a little bit if you can, what's the difference between, or is there a difference between hunger and food insecurity?
The way that I like to think about it is everybody gets hungry, right? We can skip 1 or 2 meals and we know what that does to us. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying, I was in the dentist's office actually, and they were saying, oh, if you're hungry and you're sitting in traffic, you're not paying attention to the cars that are around you, you're not paying attention to the lights or anything. All you're thinking about is you haven't had anything to eat and you need to get somewhere to get your next bite to eat. Food insecurity, I think the difference that we explain, food insecurity is not knowing where that next meal is going to come from or not knowing how you're going to pay for that next meal. And the issue of chronic food insecurity is long-standing, is impactful on all of these things that we've been talking about to this point today. So that's kind of the way that I would break that down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to that, except, having chronic insecurity about a lot of things, but certainly about something as necessary as food, can really cause significant sort of emotional and psychological harm. I mean, if you don't know how you're going to be able to get food, if you don't know whether your children are going to eat coming on the coming weekend, that's gonna do something to you. And one problem then cascades into multiple physical and mental health problems.
Next question, it is for you, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of want to throw this in there. I'm really a big empath these days, and I think the reason why we sometimes can't wrap our minds around these things totally is we feel sympathy, but we don't really feel empathy, and there, for lack of leadership, I would be, a lot of us would be, all right? And so I just want us to remember, empathy means what happens when you truly think that could happen to you. And so what I want you just to kind of put in your mind about this is, and you can close your eyes if you want, think of something that you really, really want. Think of something, and it can even be a dish. Right now, I really want crawfish. I want to go to a crawfish bar. I've been to a crawfish bar the whole season, haven't had one crawfish. Anybody have one? You can invite me, right? But then just think about anything, eat food, whatever, that you really, really, really want. And then realize you can't have it. I mean, anything. Love from your girlfriend, a new car, clothes, anything. And you can't have that. And that's what you got to think about when you're talking about food. We take it so much for granted. So the difference between, in my opinion, hunger, food insecurity is for us to wrap our minds around is that we have to be more empathetic to understand that it's not just I can't get it sometimes. It's just that what that does to me mentally when I can't get it. Because that really turns a whole different page on who you are as a person as time goes on. And always, as a scientist, there's a new study that came out just the other day that showed that if you take Tylenol every day, it actually decreases your ability to show empathy for other people. 2 new studies out of the University of UK, in the UK, came out. Look it up. Decreased ability to have empathy for others if you take Tylenol.
Dr. Baker, I want you to keep the mic for this next question. Because you touched on this in your opening comments, but if you could a little bit more. Talk to us about how food insecurity can impact a student's physical and emotional well-being.
I'll never forget when I was in college, and I think stigma has a lot to do with this, a lot. When I was in college, my roommate, he had quote-unquote welfare, right? Not because his family was poor, but because he was an independent student, and he made $4,000 a year, so that means that he could file independent, and he could get financial aid as an independent because his family didn't claim him for 2 years consecutively. So they worked the system because he was basically kind of rich, but his parents didn't claim him. 2 years, he made $4,000 a year because his uncle said that he did and gave him a W-2. And he really didn't work, okay? So he scammed the whole system. Don't look that up, you don't know who that is. But he did, and he got welfare. And this fool ate lobster, steak. Our fridge was full. And I'm from meager means, and I could have easily gotten that. But I didn't want to because I was too embarrassed to go to actually get the services. And I really could have gotten it. So what I think, and it goes a little bit further, because as a medical doctor, I was a resident. I had a family. I was married. I had a son. And I'll never forget, I had, Sears, I bought an appliance at Sears. And residents, I don't know y'all noticed, but residents don't make a lot of money. All right? Everybody thinks you're a doctor, and you are, but not really. And parents, family, everybody, taking stuff from you. And so I got a bill from Sears that said I need to pay this $2,000. And in my mind, as a 27-year-old married man with a child, I was like, what am I going to do? I don't have $2,000 in the bank. I'm damn sure not going to ask my parents, and I'm a grown man as a doctor. Stigma. I had to go get a payday loan. And can you imagine going on Veterans Boulevard and with a doctor coat on and having tooth form 5D and showing that you're a doctor and getting a payday loan, and that happened. And I had to think, what am I going to do to pay for the food that I'm going to have to put on the table? So as a student, and I was still a student because the resident's still a student. So I say all this to say, all these things and the stigma attached to this stuff, it makes a student in a college situation who really doesn't have an income, it makes them feel like they just can't go on. And then they end up dropping out of school. And we'll do it kind of the scientific thing too. If you don't have enough calcium, if you don't have enough magnesium, if you don't have enough selenium in your body, your brain doesn't function. If you don't have enough glucose in your body, your brain doesn't function. Now you could fill it up with a bunch of junky glucose, okay, which is, a bunch of, you can go to, one of these little fast food places. But the point is, that's still, to me, food insecure. Because it's not fair that I'm eating broccoli from Whole Foods at Harvard and you're eating Rally $1 burgers. Because that's all you can afford. So that means that you still won't be able to perform if that's all you can afford. So when we talk about food deserts, that's one thing, because that means when you're in a rural area or sometimes even urban area, because you can't afford the bodega food, or the bodega food is totally full of preservatives and processed. But there's also, whether there's food there or not, if it's bad food that you can afford only, then that causes problems too.
That is the perfect segue to this next question. We rehearsed this. For Dr. Caleb and Carrie, are there any policy requirements being explored to make healthier food options less expensive? For example, a salad can cost more than $10, but you can get 2 double cheeseburgers with bacon and extra cheese for $2.50 at McDonald's. Dr. Carey?
Do you want to go ahead? So I'm certainly not a market specialist on food prices, but I think that, the just sheer nature of this country being a capitalist-driven economy, that, food producers are generally going to hike up prices as high as the market will allow. So I don't really see any incentive by, food producers to make, healthy food affordable. And, certainly there are industries that get government subsidies, the dairy industry, agricultural industries, and, I sort of feel like there's a perverse incentive there to be subsidizing the market as opposed to providing, better consumer prices. But I can't say that I've seen any effort. And we certainly know that, even if somebody does get SNAP, that the benefit amount is insufficient. So it's based on a, 1960s cost of a thrifty food plan, and it's, only updated, using the consumer price index. So even that is woefully insufficient. And there was a study that came out not long ago that a researcher out of maybe Rutgers did an analysis of the USDA's nutritional guidelines, the food pyramid, against the SNAP benefit amount, and showed that they conflict with each other. A SNAP benefit amount doesn't even cover what the USDA recommends as like a nutritional diet. So.
Yeah, I mean, there are policies that, like expansion of SNAP, that could have an impact, but no, there's nothing really. Now, there are individual school districts, for example, that are taking upon themselves to increase the nutritional value of the meals that they serve, and to provide reduced or free lunch and breakfast. I mean, there's a federal program, but there's also individual efforts in different schools and school districts. So there are, like, piecemeal attempts to try to get healthier foods. I think there is a movement, though, because you asked this question, and it's based on a movement that we're all aware of, right? We're becoming more conscious of bad foods or fast foods and food deserts and eating healthier. I think we're having a good discussion. So maybe down the road there might be some improvements, but not enough right now.
Well, so one of the things that I want to mention there too, talking about these piecemeal solutions, here in the state and across the rest of the country too, With farmers markets, a lot of times those are partnering with like healthcare organizations or other partners to essentially double up SNAP dollars. So if a SNAP client went to a farmer's market and said, you know, I'm using my SNAP card and I want to use, you know, $10 or something, that farmer's market provides an extra $10 to double their benefit that they can spend in that day. So those are things that are kind of replicable if you find the right partners and organizations.
And this is the thing about health disparities that, you know, I keep going back to, because when we know that processed meat is a class 1 carcinogen, the same as smoking, but we know that the poorer you are, the more you have to eat processed meat. That ain't fair. It's just not fair. So the subsidies that have to come, you know, I think from several entities need to address that. Just because someone is being able to eat doesn't mean that it makes it equitable.
This may tie to that question too, and the next one we have is for Corey Patty. Is there any thoughts, or do you have any thoughts rather, on why food insecurity is so much higher in the South than other parts of the country?
Yes. It's the timing of this is interesting. I was actually watching an interview that Dr. Martin Luther King gave about 11 months before his assassination, just last night. And it struck me that many of the things that he was talking about are the same things that we're still talking about, right? Economic justice, hunger and poverty, the challenges that we have in trying to overcome all of those issues. And largely, I mean, it comes back to an issue of racism in many cases, right? That there are policies in place that create poverty, maintain poverty, and the demographics of the South kind of reflect the history of that, unfortunately.
Ms. Ekbal,
Yes.
from your perspective as a student, we're all here to learn from you, right?
Okay.
Give us some ideas on how,
Have you eaten?
There you go.
Here it is. I'm so sorry, y'all, because I haven't eaten. From a student's perspective,
Yes.
how can we increase awareness of food insecurity on the campuses? How can we bring students around? I think one of the panelists mentioned that even on campuses where there are services, many times the students don't know. And I can tell you from an administrative standpoint, many times we think the word is out there, right? We send an email and, well, we've told them, they know. But share with us, give us your thoughts about what we can do.
Okay, I think a lot of instructors should tell us at the beginning of the semester about those services. There should be in survey boxes, like put some boxes anywhere in the campus so that people can see that single stop is there. Because a lot of students don't know that single stop exists. Yeah, and having, like how Dr. Heber said earlier, some students have embarrassment. So they are not strong enough to go and ask for help. And it is bad because they are going to drop their studies and they can't graduate. Yeah, you're welcome.
I want to stop and see if there are any questions right now from anyone in the audience or anyone on the panel. Yes, sir.
I guess to the panel, my question is, Dr. Abraham talked about the sympathy as well as empathize. Now, we all here know that there's a mission that we must be on in order to combat this problem. But when I think about the food pantry, it's like, if we are furnishing it with the preserved type things that you talk about, and that I hear, because I have coffee with you too, you just don't know it. But the challenge is, if I'm providing those things in the pantry, how do I, from a
health standpoint, health conscious standpoint, make sure that the pantry gets the things that health-wise can actually help out, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to fill it with the canned goods, but we know the canned goods have the preservatives and have all of these things that are not so good. And of course, if we're eating that in a large portion, then certainly it can't be healthy. So how do we go about making sure that the items that are in the pantry are, number one, health conscious, but number two, is actually meeting the students' need?
That's a really important question, because I want people to really understand that as you consume foods, and some foods are good, some foods are better, some foods are bad, right? So to me, it comes down to money. It comes down to money. And when I say money, I don't mean money that needs to come out of the pocket. It's money that needs to be subsidized in a way more systemically, more institutionally for the universities. I mean, Dylan, we have a student health center, and we strategically put the student health center in a place that was a little bit off the beaten path. Because when a student comes in and they are sick, whether they have an STI or whether they have stomach pains, they may be too embarrassed to come to the student health center. Okay, so that's why we did that. So I think it has to be a bigger picture here to see how we can address this. But I think it comes down to the money to be able to get these types of food. And just want to throw this out there too. Canned goods, by definition, with a lot of processed food, are not necessarily good. But I just want to, Whole Foods is great. I call it whole paycheck. All right, but that's a whole other issue. But I want people to always remember that when you get fresh fruits and vegetables, okay, fresh fruits and vegetables are picked. Especially if they're coming from California or another place, they're picked before they're ripe, which means just like if you pick a baby before it's ripe, it doesn't get all the nutrients it needs from its mother, correct? Yeah. So that vegetable, same way. So by the time it gets trucked here, it may not be the freshest, and it probably has a lot of pesticides on it, possibly, okay? But what I'm saying is that if you have a canned fruit or vegetable, or a frozen fruit or vegetable, that vegetable is actually picked at the height of freshness and then put in the can. So the point is that if I don't want you to go out and spend so much money on one little piece of broccoli from Whole Foods saying that it's organic, when you can get a bunch of canned foods and it actually may not be as bad. And frozen is actually just as good as the fresh. And the only thing that's better is if you have a farmer's market where you are. Mm-hmm. And then that means that it's picked at the peak of freshness with all the vitamins, and it's not trucked in from some other place. That's why the farmer's market concept is so important. And at HBCUs, community college and HBCUs, we can no longer turn the blind eye to this problem, because our students are disproportionately affected. Because our students are students that come first generation college students, generally. And so we have issues with gaps between the federal aid, and we have gaps in the food. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I think, Dylan, we're doing a great job at making sure that this does not happen. But there are colleges across the country that don't see this as a primary concern. And the HBCU and community college, they need to see it as a primary concern. Money is the problem. If we had all the money in the world, add water to the lake, all the boats rise. But if the flower's not blooming, you cannot question the ability of the flower to bloom. You have to question the environment in which the flower is trying to bloom. And that's the problem, the environment.
So that, Corey keeps, Dr. Avery keeps just setting me up.
It's Corey. It's Corey.
I have a question. I think you wanted to piggyback on that. And while you do that, I also wanted Corey Patty to address, because we're all here as college administrators, faculty, and staff to address this issue on our campuses. So if you would share with us after you do your piggyback, what are the resources that are available to colleges and universities in the city who want to provide these types of services to their students?
So I want to respond to this first too, because I think Dr. Aber was correct in everything he said. Money is very important to this, but it's also logistics and infrastructure, right? So at the food bank level, so just to back up a bit, food banks are basically warehousers, right? They collect food, they distribute it through all of their partners, a food pantry that might be on a campus. One of the things that we see, there's a slogan amongst food bankers across the country. They'll tell you, if you see one food bank, you've seen one food bank, right? So go visit Second Harvest and you'll see the fantastic kitchen that they have set up where they're producing hot meals that can be flash frozen, distributed in disaster situations across the state and country. Those are distributed hot, oftentimes to children's programs after school and such. But then if you go to the Food Bank of Northeast Louisiana, for instance, in the Delta region, one of the highest poverty areas in the country, their situation's very different, right? So fresh produce is a key. Fresh produce is kind of the next frontier for a lot of food banks in the country and in our state as well. But managing that from the food bank level, that starts at, do we have an infrastructure? Do we have refrigeration and freezers that are able to accommodate all of the fresh produce that we need to distribute, that we need to receive and distribute? Do we have partner agencies that are open often enough that they're receiving fresh produce and being able to turn it over quickly before it spoils? Do they have refrigeration and freezers and such? Do clients know what to do with it? Do clients know what they want? So there are a lot of questions that come with this issue, but I think a lot of folks are trying to work towards the education that's necessary, providing the resources that are necessary so that those pantries, and I understand that the one here on campus is open daily, right? So knowing that, you know, you've got the resources that are in place where you can receive and distribute that stuff, you know, without it going bad is important. What was your question?
How can colleges and universities in the city, that wasn't the one. What resources are available for colleges and universities in the city who want to provide these type of services to their students?
Yeah, so food banks are always available, right? And I mentioned it earlier, but the issue of food insecurity obviously goes well beyond what food banks are able to do. As a network in the state, we distribute upwards of 66 million meals a year to folks in need. But we're talking about SNAP, which we often refer to as the backbone of the anti-hunger movement in the country. SNAP, for every meal that a food bank in the U.S. distributes, SNAP distributes 12. So think of the scale of that. It's just a much bigger, much more appropriate program for servicing the needs of folks just in their day-to-day lives. And we know, too, it's come up today, that that benefit is often not enough. So you're looking at people that are utilizing SNAP, utilizing the food bank, and maybe even having to find some other resources to try to make their ends meet, too. But you know, across the state here, covering all 64 parishes of Louisiana, our food banks are available. One of the services that we have in each of our 5 food banks is a SNAP outreach coordinator. So what they do is travel within their various regions, connect with potentially eligible clients to explain the program. You know, we talk about that stigma. There are a lot of myths to work through, and it's been fascinating for me. I think every meeting, every convening, every listening session that we go to and talk about what SNAP actually is and kind of answering some of the questions, dispelling some of the ideas that folks have in their heads about it. You know, we talk about the income requirements that are set in place for the program. For a family of 4, that income level, the level of poverty for a family of 4 in the U.S. is under $26,000. So imagine trying to feed a family on $26,000. And, you know, kind of a lot of times I think people's eyes open, like, oh, wow, how would I do that? So I talk about our outreach coordinators. They are able and available to anybody that's interested to provide information on the program, help a lot of folks that need assistance in applying for benefits one of the things that happened several years ago under the previous governor's administration was, consistent budget cuts. I think everybody's aware of that, but we saw a number of local and regional DCFS offices get closed, and that SNAP application process, where you used to be able to walk into an office and sit down with somebody and have them walk you through the process of applying for the program, was moved online. And we know that in many parts of the state, people don't have significant, strong, consistent access to the internet, or we've got low technological literacy where they may not be able to walk through that application process themselves. So our folks are always available to assist in that process. If anybody wants to connect on that, I'd be happy to put you in touch with the team at Second Harvest. They're always looking for places to provide more information. I think one of the things that Carrie talked about was the concern that we have in SNAP that a lot of college students are essentially excluded from the program, but especially where we're talking about non-traditional students or older students, students with children, whatever the situation may be. I think it's good to have somebody in place that can provide details and factual information, because a lot of times people just don't know, right?
Before I get to Dr. Caleb, I just wanted to share with you, throwing out some things. After the program, we will be more than happy to share with you this. I believe it's mentioned single stop several times. I'm sure some of you may not know what it is. We can talk with you about that. And just to acknowledge that we were fortunate here at Delgado to receive some of the support that's been mentioned recently. I think it was 7 of the institutions, Dr. Wainwright, in the LCTCS was gifted with the refrigerator freezer type equipment that is mentioned that is necessary to keep some of the food fresh. It is located in our single stop office in the care corner, which is our food pantry. And so it's that type of support that is coming. I think that we received that through a donation from Blue Cross, which is Healthy Food. And it's that type of support from across the state that I think is coming into play, that is assisting colleges and universities in really being able to have viable food pantries for their students. But we can share more with you all after this program. Dr. Caleb, how do college administrators and educators address the stigma that you mentioned earlier associated with food insecurity for our students?
Well, I think one of the things is to build in access to food in ways that do not necessarily single out a group of students. So, for example, when colleges and universities can have trips to the grocery store, right, or a normal stop on a shuttle route is at an affordable grocery store, or there's special trips to the grocery store. You're not saying, okay, all those people who are, suffering from hunger and no, it's anybody who needs to get affordable food. This is a great opportunity. Climb aboard. If they can do things like that, or provide. And I've started seeing this happen at Loyola, and I think at other places as well. Doing more sort of community meals kind of operations, people eating together, like in dorms, providing pizza or something like that, or just going, forever when you go to an event on a college campus, there's usually has been the cookies and the coffee or some sort of refreshments, right? I have begun to see like real food show up at these events. And so it's an opportunity for students. Again, it's not okay, those students who are hungry, who don't have any money, please eat here. It's just for the community. And if people are hungry for any reason, anybody wants some food, please help yourself. And having those kinds of things available. I mean, and we're New Orleans, we're always celebrating with food, so it's a natural thing to have food at events. So the more that we can build food into the general operations and culture of the place, more people will have an opportunity to eat who might not have had that opportunity. So that's a couple of possibilities.
Well, thank you. And before I'm going to turn it over and see if anyone else has questions before we begin to wrap up this morning. I did want to also add, when Corey Patty mentioned about using the resources, just to give you some more ideas, some of the things that Gilda and I have talked about since the donation from Healthy Blue is utilizing the resources that we have at our fingertips. And I just offered this to the other institutions. We have a culinary program here on campus. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is, can we get the culinary department to offer some healthy cooking classes for our students. So, because oftentimes, you mention vegetables and those type of things to your students, and they're like, but if we could give them some tips on how to make it tasty, that may go a long way for those students. Are there any questions? Any other questions from our audience? Yo, not that shy. Or is it that the panelist has been that great? It's been that great. So I want to then allow the panelists to offer any final thoughts that they have before we move to the final portion of this program. We can just go down the table this week, starting with Dr. Aja.
I just want to thank everybody for coming. I think as you leave here, you have a new outlook on what this actually means to people on college campuses, people in the hood, people on elementary school campuses. It's a really big problem. I do want to offer, she mentioned at the very beginning, Ms. Arnell mentioned that we have a service called College Health TV. It is a free service. We have lots of videos that run about food insecurity, and basically what happens is that because it's a free service, I need to talk to someone from every institution in this room here, because this thing is at Duke, Harvard, USC, every major institution, and I have some institutions in this city that don't run it yet. So it's a Roku channel. We give you the Roku stick, you plug it in, and it runs a continuous loop of HD video, peer educated with students that actually say this, that have the videos that actually talk about the health information in 2-minute vignettes, and just runs without a problem. So I want you guys to use it, utilize it, because it's there for you, and other universities around the country use it. Okay. I want to thank you also. Remember that most of our problems, if we're sitting in this room right now, are first world problems. Put it in perspective and know that somebody's not going to eat tonight. All right?
Thank you. So I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here and just say that vote, register to vote, get your students to register to vote, encourage them to vote, provide voting education materials. This is not an endorsement of any candidate or party. Just to be very clear, I know y'all have some things coming up.
I ain't scared to do that.
I know y'all have some things coming up in the fall, and I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, we've had a culture in this country for years that have created harmful policies and systems. And some of that has been disenfranchisement and ways to, marginalize people that do not fit those cultural norms. And until we take voting very seriously, those things are going to continue. When we have a dominant perspective that are creating our culture, they're creating policies, they're creating systems that continue to perpetuate harm, and voting is going to be one of the best ways to undo some of that systemic harm.
Thank you. I would like you to imagine yourself like having a low income and thinking about paying your rent, your utilities, everything you have to pay. So the only thing you think, oh, about food, you leave it to side because you know you have to pay where you sleep, pay your cars, insurance, everything. So the food pantry really help because you know you can go there and have some food and you focus on your studies. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of points come to mind here at the end of the program. I think increasing the accessibility and services of health and wellness centers on college campuses would be a good thing to do. Dr. Aber mentioned about through this, he'd been able to identify students who may have hunger issues, right? Food insecurity issues. But other issues may be put off, health issues may be put off because of lack of resources. And that can maybe be identified and maybe addressed in college health centers. You know, illness is a major cause of financial problems, right? Number one cause of bankruptcy in America is health bills. Right? So if we can deal with health problems before they get worse, help students deal with these problems within healthcare centers on college campuses to the degree that we can, that would be very, very helpful. You know, before these problems get worse, cost them more money, and then they don't have money for food, right? So these are interrelated issues. So health and wellness centers should be front and center in this particular battle. And then finally, and to echo what has been said here, I mean, repeatedly we talk about money, we talk about inequality. I think we need to be, whether we want to talk about individual candidates' endorsement or not, we certainly need to be talking about the public policy issues that are before us in our elections, local, state, federal elections. You know, I'm an advocate of free college. I'm an advocate of reducing the $1.5 trillion student loan debt and growing. Yeah. I mean, it's a drain on our economy, but but for all those individuals, it causes great harm. There's a lot of things that they can't do because they're paying these bills, and one of the things they can't do is maybe eat nutritious food. Raising the minimum wage. You know, we definitely need to do that so people have more money in their pocket, and don't believe the stuff about if you raise minimum wage, this causes unemployment and stuff. There are multiple studies on this, little to no impact on unemployment, minimum wage. Minimum wage stimulates the economy and puts more money in people's pockets, and a lot of people need that extra money for the basics. Free universal health care. We're the only industrialized nation in the world that doesn't have universal health care. We need to do something about that. That is a drain. There's so many people who are putting off buying their medicines because you know, they just can't afford it, or they choose, you know, food or my heart medicine. That's insane. That's morally repugnant in a nation as rich as ours. It should not happen, and we should state that very clearly whenever appropriate, wherever appropriate. Anything that we can do to reduce overall inequality in America will address this problem of food insecurity and many other problems that we have. You know, and just quickly, you know, subsidized child care, whether it be campus child care or elsewhere. Parental leave, right? We don't have paid parental leave in the United States. We're like the only country on the face of the earth, right? There's a few island nations, and I think Papua New Guinea or something. There's a few places in the world that don't have at least basic paid maternity leave, right? I mean, if Afghanistan can have it, right? And a lot of other, the United States can have paid maternity leave. At the very least, we need comprehensive paid family leave.
We didn't even have FMLA until like 1992. Correct.
Yeah, and that, and that was a battle. That was a battle to get that. Yeah. That's right. And it was mentioned expanding the earned income tax credit and child tax credits. I mean, that was mentioned. Those are good. These are very, very important public policy. And I know people don't want to wade into political debate sometimes, but we need to. I mean, if we're very serious, there are things we can do at Delgado and Loyola and a lot of places and in the consortium we can do to help our students that are in need. But we have to think about the big picture too and know that there is a lot of work that we need to be doing to bring needed fundamental social change. No.
So I would say that we have to look at the issues in terms of short-term response than longer-term response, right? So there are hungry, food insecure people that need to be fed today and tomorrow, and we have to find food to provide to them. But then two, all of these programs that are essential towards accomplishing that. And unfortunately, many of them are under attack right now, right? We've seen all of the legislation. We got through a kind of a nasty farm bill fight a few months back, and some rules that have been promulgated by the USDA in the time since that makes SNAP harder for people between 18 and 50 to stay on if they don't have access to work and so on and so forth related to the work requirements. But you know, there are so many programs in place, SNAP, CACFP, TFAP, CSFP, all of these ag programs and such that are responsible for providing food to people that, you know, generally a lot of people don't know a whole lot about, right? So I would make a plug for some of the work that our organization is doing in partnership with several others across the state. The Louisiana Anti-Hunger Coalition hosts calls monthly to discuss these programs, things that are happening at the policy level, and oftentimes the ask of folks that want to get involved is contact your elected officials. Tell them that, you know, SNAP can't stand a cut because there are hungry people that need to be fed, that CSFP needs to be included in next year's federal budget because there are seniors that need that service, 60,000 some seniors across the state, low-income seniors that need that service. So I would say just, you know, try and connect on the things that are being done. To echo a lot of what has been said today, we can work in silos, but we're so much better when we're able to connect kind of at a higher level of things that are happening in New Orleans, things that are happening in Baton Rouge, things that are happening at the Capitol especially. So I'd be happy to share any of that information. Thank you all.
In closing, as we consider the information that we've heard this morning and we think about our roles as educators, both individually and collectively, I think inherently after today's discussion, we are all likely feeling motivated to do something. The adage is, I am my brother and my sister's keeper, and it takes a village to raise a child, and to whom much is given, much is required, comes to mind for me. For some, it may be as simple as just understanding that our students cannot learn if they're hungry. After hearing the medical, the economic, and policy implications related to food insecurity, and after hearing this equality affirm how food pantries and institutional support impacts student success, how can we not ask ourselves, what can we do? Or what else should we do? My answer is, let's find out and talk about it today. So Delgado Community College is extending an invitation to all of our sister institutions to work together to address food insecurity on our campuses. The need is obvious, the support is available, and the change and the solution is necessary. We wanted to host this panel discussion just as a starting point to what will hopefully materialize as a citywide consortium of higher educational institutions focused on this important topic. I have to believe that as a collective, we can do so much more for our students than what is possible on our own. We have a clean slate and a requisite expertise to develop a framework to determine mutual goals and yield the desired outcomes for students. Our hope is that today is the beginning of this work. We'd like each institution interested in joining the consortium to sign just this celebratory form that we have at the table outside. Dr. Wainwright has agreed to disseminate it to all of the local college presidents and chancellors for something a little bit more formal. We agreed to host the first planning meeting and hope that we can rotate to each campus on the schedule that would be determined by the group. Carrie and her peers at class had ideas on the foundation for us to do this work, and perhaps our other panelists will lend their expertise on how we can move forward as well. Once again, on behalf of the entire Delgado family, we thank you for your time and your interest. Before closing, bear with me, I have to thank Bob Dunn, that's the good guy in the back of the camera. Heights from me, Leslie Salinaro, Hilton Kidry. I saw Tony Cook from our Public Relations and Marketing Department for their usual amazing support. I'm sure you noticed that we are recording this morning's session, and we will let you know as soon as it's live on our YouTube channel if you want to share it with folks on your campuses. I have to thank my right, I had to remember which one, my right and my left hand, and they have to stand up. Dr. Teresa DeGroom and Hilda E. Banks. The dynamic duo behind the work that we do, not just with single stop. We recently opened the Daughters of Charity Clinic here on campus, offering behavioral health now to our students, soon to offer medical health, and of course, my boss. Has been very supportive. I want to thank him for his leadership and his trust in me and the team. He called us about a month ago. He called us to his office and he said, I have an idea. So since we've done it now, it's okay for me to say we were all a little nervous when we went over to hear about this. But, you know, that can be scary when the chancellor calls you to the office with an idea. But I hope that he's pleased and it's what he wanted, very much so. I would not be a person who is good or responsible for enrollment management at this institution if I did not have some gifts for our panelists without brand. A few photos. Please hang around if you want to talk to the panelists, but I want to make sure we get the photos with them before any of them have to run out. Thank you all, and we look forward to working together.